The alarm on Meridian Reach screamed before I even understood what it meant. Red light poured through the observation dome, and every screen around me lit up with the same word, repeated in 6 languages. Breach. My hands were shaking before my mind caught up with my body. I am Kaelor Vin, an observer of the Ithran Accord, and on that day I had never seen true danger in my life. I was about to see more of it than I ever wanted. I had been assigned to Meridian Reach 3 months earlier, a joint station shared by a dozen species, built to prove that peaceful cooperation across the stars was possible. My task was simple: watch, record, and report on how the newest member of the wider galactic community behaved under pressure. That newest member was humanity, and the humans stationed with us were a small unit that everyone on the station called Special Forces, though none of us understood what those 2 words truly meant. Before that day, I believed I understood danger. I had studied conflict from records and simulations. I had watched calm debates in council chambers where disagreements were settled with words and patience. My species, the Ithran, prized diplomacy above all things. We rarely fought. When we did, it was slow, careful, and reluctant. So when 5 armed raiders forced their way through a supply airlock on the lower deck, my first instinct was to freeze, to search for the nearest negotiator, to wait for procedure to unfold the way it always had. The humans did not freeze. I remember the sound most clearly. Not shouting, not panic, but footsteps. Fast, controlled, moving toward the danger instead of away from it. A woman's voice cut through the comm channel, steady as still water. That was Olivia Hart, though I did not know her name yet. She spoke like she was reading a shopping list, not walking into a firefight. 3 raiders on deck 4, she said. Hostages in the cargo bay. Moving to intercept. I pressed myself against the wall of the observation dome and watched the security feed with my 4 eyes wide open, my heart's pounding in my chest, in a rhythm my species is not built to sustain for long. On the screen, 5 humans moved through the corridor in a formation that looked almost like a dance. No one spoke unless it mattered. No one hesitated. A man near the front, broad-shouldered, with short dark hair, raised a closed fist, and the entire group stopped as one, as if they shared a single mind. That was Daniel Cole, the one they called Captain, though I would later learn he never let anyone call him that in casual conversation. The raiders were desperate, poorly equipped smugglers who had chosen the wrong station on the wrong day. They had taken 3 station workers hostage in the cargo bay, screaming demands into an open channel that nobody was answering. I expected the humans to negotiate. Every species I had studied negotiated first, words before action, patience before consequence. Daniel Cole did not send a message to the raiders. He sent a message to his own team. 4 words that I still remember exactly. 2 minutes. Clean and quiet. I did not understand what quiet meant until I watched it happen. The humans split without any spoken argument about who would go where. Grace Miller, small and quick, slipped through a maintenance shaft I did not even know existed on the station schematics. Nathan Price took position near a support column, motionless, breathing slow, watching through a scope with the patience of someone who could wait a lifetime if he needed to. Ryan Fletcher moved to the far side of the cargo bay entrance, and Olivia Hart and Daniel Cole approached from the front, walking calmly into a room where 3 armed strangers were shouting threats. I watched the feed with my breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. I expected shouting. I expected the desperate confusion I had read about in old conflict archives. Instead, I watched 5 people move with the precision of a single machine built from 5 separate parts. There was no wasted motion, no wasted words. When it ended, less than 90 seconds after Daniel Cole gave the order, all 3 hostages were safe, and the raiders had been restrained without a single serious injury on either side. I sat in the observation dome long after the alarm stopped, staring at a now quiet screen, trying to process what I had just witnessed. My supervisor, an older Ithran named Sorel Dane, found me still sitting there an hour later. "You look disturbed," she said. "I am not disturbed," I told her, though that was not true. "I am trying to understand." "Understand what?" I looked at her and struggled to find the words. "Those 5 humans were called Special Forces," I said. "Not soldiers, not warriors, Special Forces, as if this were merely one division among many, a smaller category within something larger. If this is what they consider special among their kind, I do not know what to call the rest." Sorrel Dane did not answer right away. She looked at the frozen image on the screen, the 5 humans standing calm and unbothered in a room that had held danger only minutes before, and something in her expression shifted, though I could not name it at the time. I understand that look now. It was the beginning of fear, wrapped carefully inside professional curiosity, the way most fear disguises itself among people who pride themselves on staying calm. Over the following days, I tried to speak with the humans directly, hoping to understand them better than any report could explain. Daniel Cole was polite but distant, answering questions with short, practical sentences that gave away little. Olivia Hart was warmer, willing to talk, though she seemed endlessly amused by how carefully I studied her every word, as if I were trying to catch her hiding some deeper secret. "We are not special," she told me once, sharing a quiet meal in the station's common hall. "We are just trained. Anyone can be trained." I did not believe her then. I still do not fully believe her now, though I understand her meaning better than I did that day. What she called training, my species would have called something closer to transformation. The humans on that station moved through danger the way the rest of us move through ordinary hallways, without fear controlling their steps, without hesitation clouding their choices. I asked Nathan Price, the quiet one, why he had not fired his weapon during the rescue, since he had held a clear position with what I assumed was a clear opportunity. "Didn't need to," he said simply. "Watching is sometimes more useful than shooting. Knowing you could stop something bad from happening is often enough to make sure it never does." That answer unsettled me more than anything I had witnessed on the security feed. I had expected humans to celebrate their capability for confrontation. Instead, they seemed to view their own readiness as something almost boring, a simple fact of daily life rather than a point of pride. That night, I filed my first formal report to the Ithran Accord command structure. I tried to describe what I had seen with careful, measured language, the way all our reports were expected to sound. But halfway through writing, I stopped following the standard format entirely. I wrote instead about the silence in that corridor, the calm voice giving orders, the terrifying efficiency of 5 people who treated crisis as routine. I ended my report with a single line that I was later told made several senior officials uncomfortable. "If this is what humans call special forces, then I believe we have vastly underestimated what humanity as a whole may be capable of, and I do not believe we understand them at all." I did not know then how right I was, or how much more I would soon learn about the warriors the galaxy had barely begun to notice. The days that followed felt strange, caught between the routine hum of station life and the quiet unease that now lived behind my eyes whenever I passed the humans in the corridor. Meridian Reach returned to its normal rhythm faster than I expected. Cargo shipments resumed. Diplomatic meetings continued. The raiders were transferred to a holding vessel bound for the nearest judicial outpost, and within 2 days, most of the station staff spoke of the incident as if it were already ancient history. I could not let it go so easily. I found myself watching Daniel Cole and his team from a distance, studying the way they moved through ordinary tasks. I noticed how Grace Miller checked every medical kit twice, even on quiet mornings. I noticed how Ryan Fletcher walked the length of the docking bay before every shift, counting exits without seeming to realize he was doing it. I noticed how Olivia Hart could laugh freely one moment and turn completely still the next, the instant a comm channel crackled with anything unusual. They were not acting like soldiers preparing for battle. They were acting like people who had simply never stopped preparing, even when there was nothing left to prepare for. I brought my questions to Sorrel Dane again, hoping she might have deeper insight than I did. She agreed to help me access older archives, records that were not commonly shared outside of certain diplomatic and historical circles. What I found there changed the direction of my thinking entirely. Humanity's recorded history was filled with conflict on a scale that startled me. Not merely disagreements between neighboring settlements, but sustained, organized struggles that spanned generations, entire centuries defined by war and recovery, and war again. My own species had experienced isolated periods of tension, brief and painful, quickly resolved through negotiation. Humans had experienced war as a constant companion throughout most of their history, a shadow that followed them from their earliest recorded conflicts to the final wars that unified their homeworld before they ever reached the stars. What struck me most was not the frequency of their conflicts, but the philosophy that emerged from it. Ancient human military doctrine spoke of concepts that felt utterly foreign to Ithran thinking: total commitment, refusal to abandon those who could not protect themselves, a willingness to accept great personal cost in order to secure victory, or protect others, rather than retreating at the first sign of danger, the way our own history strongly favored. I read one passage from an old human military document that stayed with me for days afterward. It described a principle so simple, it barely needed explanation, yet its implications felt enormous. No one gets left behind. 4 words, and yet within them lived an entire philosophy of loyalty that shaped how humans trained, fought, and thought about every mission they undertook. I brought this discovery to Sorel Dane, expecting her to share my growing unease. Instead, she seemed almost dismissive. "Every species has a violent history, Kalor," she said. "We simply learn to move past ours more quickly. Perhaps humans are still catching up." I disagreed, though I did not say so directly. It did not feel like humans were still catching up to peaceful ideals the rest of the galaxy had already achieved. It felt like humans had developed something entirely different, a philosophy built not around avoiding conflict altogether, but around ensuring that if conflict came, they would be ready to end it decisively and protect everyone who could not protect themselves. I requested access to broader Galactic Council records, curious whether other species held similar concerns. What I found surprised me. Several smaller diplomatic outposts had already filed cautious reports about human military behavior during joint exercises. None of the reports described humans as aggressive or dangerous toward allies. If anything, every report praised human reliability and protectiveness. But each report carried an undertone of quiet unease, the same feeling I could not shake myself, a sense that humanity's capability for conflict had developed along a completely different path than the rest of the galaxy, one shaped by necessity rather than choice. One particular exercise report caught my attention: a joint training simulation between human forces and forces from the Villan systems had been halted early, not because of any failure on the human side, but because Villan commanders requested it. The report included a brief statement from a Villan officer that I read several times before fully absorbing its meaning. "We built our weapons to discourage war," the officer had written. "It seems humans built theirs to end one." That single sentence rearranged something in my understanding of the galaxy. Most spacefaring species I studied approached warfare as something to be minimized, controlled, or avoided entirely, a tool of last resort, wielded reluctantly and with great caution. Humanity, it seemed, approached warfare from an entirely different direction. Not eager for conflict, not reckless with violence, but deeply, thoroughly prepared for it in a way that felt almost instinctive, woven into how they trained their finest warriors from the very beginning. I mentioned this discovery to Daniel Cole during one of our rare conversations, hoping he might offer some clarity. "We don't like fighting," he told me, his expression unreadable. "Nobody who has actually done it enjoys it the way stories make it sound. But we learned a long time ago that hoping trouble stays away doesn't keep it away. Better to be ready and never need it than to need it and not be ready." I asked him what made human special forces different from ordinary human soldiers, since the distinction seemed significant enough to warrant a separate name entirely. He thought about the question longer than I expected before answering. "Ordinary soldiers train to fight when they're told to," he said. "We train to solve problems other people can't solve, usually with the smallest amount of noise possible. Most of our work, nobody ever hears about. The op you saw wasn't even a hard one. That one just happened where you could watch it." That last sentence troubled me more than anything else he had said. If the rescue I witnessed, the calm precision that had shaken my entire understanding of conflict, was considered simple by human standards, I found myself deeply unsettled, wondering what a difficult operation might look like. I did not have to wonder for very long. 3 weeks after the incident in the cargo bay, tension began rising across several outer systems near Meridian Reach. Reports came in slowly at first, fragments of information about disrupted supply routes and missing patrol vessels near the border regions controlled by an expansionist power known as the Drazul Compact. I had heard of the Drazul before, mostly through cautious diplomatic warnings passed between council members. They were not part of any peaceful accord. They believed strength alone determined territory, and they had spent decades slowly testing the boundaries of weaker neighboring systems, absorbing what they could, and retreating only when resistance proved too costly. Meridian Reach sat near the edge of contested space, a strategic point that several major powers valued for very different reasons. My own leadership viewed it as a symbol of peaceful cooperation. The Drazul Compact, I would soon learn, viewed it as a convenient target. Command structures across the station grew quieter and more serious as the days passed. Daniel Cole and his team spent long hours in briefings I was not permitted to attend, though I noticed subtle changes in their behavior that told me more than any official report could have. Grace Miller restocked medical supplies with greater urgency. Nathan Price spent hours in the station's small firing range, though I never once saw him miss a target. Ryan Fletcher ran diagnostic checks on the station's small defense craft late into the night, long after his official shift had ended. I approached Olivia Hart during one of these quiet evenings, unable to hide the concern in my voice. "Is something dangerous approaching?" I asked her. She considered her answer carefully before speaking, which was unusual for her. "Something's definitely coming," she admitted. "We don't know exactly what yet. Could be nothing. Could be a real problem. Either way, we get ready the same." I asked her if she was afraid. She smiled, though it did not quite reach her eyes. "Being afraid and being ready aren't opposites, Kaylor," she said. "Sometimes they're the same thing, wearing different clothes." I did not fully understand her answer that night. I would understand it completely within the week, when the first Drazul warships appeared on Meridian Reach's outer sensors, and the calm, ordinary rhythm of station life shattered into something far more dangerous than anything I had witnessed before. The alert came just after midnight station time, though time meant very little once the sensors confirmed what everyone had quietly feared. 3 Drazul vessels emerged from the darkness beyond our outer scanning range, moving with the confident, unhurried pace of a force that expected no real resistance. Meridian Reach was a diplomatic station, lightly defended, built for cooperation rather than confrontation. To the Drazul Compact, it must have looked like an easy prize. They did not open communication channels. They did not issue demands or warnings. They simply began moving toward the station, with clear hostile intent, weapon systems active, formation tightening as they closed the distance. I stood frozen in the observation dome once again, watching the same screens that had shown me the cargo bay rescue weeks earlier. Except this time, the danger was not 5 armed raiders in a single corridor. This time it was an entire attacking force bearing down on a station filled with civilians, diplomats, and workers from a dozen different species who had never imagined true conflict reaching their doorstep. Daniel Cole's voice came over the station's emergency channel, calm in a way that felt almost impossible given the circumstances. "All non-combat personnel move to the shielded lower decks immediately," he said. "This is not a drill. Follow evacuation routes exactly as trained. We have this." Sorrel Dane grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the evacuation corridor, but I hesitated, glancing back at the observation dome one final time. I caught a brief glimpse of Daniel Cole moving past the doorway below, already dressed in full combat gear. Expression utterly focused, utterly calm. Beside him, Olivia Hart carried additional equipment toward the station's small defense hub, moving with the same unshaken confidence I had seen during the cargo bay rescue, except now the stakes were immeasurably higher. I followed Sorrel Dane down into the lower decks, along with hundreds of others, but something inside me refused to simply hide and wait. I found a maintenance terminal still connected to limited security feeds, and stayed close enough to watch, driven by a need to understand what was about to happen, even if understanding meant facing genuine fear for the first time in my life. The Drazul vessels opened fire on the station's outer defense grid within minutes, testing our shields with calculated strikes designed to probe for weaknesses rather than destroy outright. They wanted to claim it, not destroy it. That single fact terrified me more than open aggression would have, because it meant they expected total surrender, and they clearly believed nothing standing between them and that surrender posed any real threat. They had never encountered human special forces before. Meridian Reach's small defense fleet consisted of only 2 combat-capable vessels, neither designed for sustained conflict against a coordinated attacking force. Ryan Fletcher took command of the lead vessel, moving with a precision that made the outdated ship look far more capable than its specifications suggested it should be. Nathan Price positioned himself at a secondary defense point near the station's main docking structure, watching for any attempt at boarding. I watched through the security feed as the Drazul commander, A towering figure named Vorak Thane, according to intercepted communications, ordered a direct approach toward the station's primary docking bay, clearly intending to send boarding parties to seize control quickly and decisively. He did not expect what was waiting for him. Daniel Cole and Olivia Hart positioned their small team near the docking bay entrance, using the station's narrow corridors to their advantage in ways that reminded me instantly of the earlier rescue, except now the danger belonged to trained combatants rather than desperate smugglers. Grace Miller established a secure medical position nearby, ready for any injury, her expression calm despite the chaos building around her. The first Drazul boarding party breached the docking bay within the hour, moving with confidence that quickly turned into confusion once they realized the corridors ahead offered no easy path forward. Every turn seemed to lead into carefully controlled choke points. Every attempt to advance met calm, measured resistance that gave ground only when doing so served a larger purpose. I watched Daniel Cole direct his small team with quiet hand signals, adjusting their position constantly, never allowing the Drazul boarding party any opportunity to gain real momentum. It was not the desperate scramble I expected from such an uneven confrontation. It was controlled, patient, almost surgical in its precision. Hours passed in this careful standoff, the Drazul unable to break through despite vastly superior numbers, the humans unwilling to yield ground despite being significantly outmatched in raw force. I began to understand, watching this unfold, that numbers alone had never been the deciding factor in human conflict. Preparation, adaptability, and absolute refusal to break under pressure mattered far more. Then came the moment that changed everything, the moment I still think about more than any other from that long and terrible day. A support strut collapsed near the docking bay entrance during an exchange of weapons fire, trapping two station workers who had failed to reach the evacuation route in time, a young engineer named Ethan Cross and his colleague Chloe Adams, both civilians with no combat training whatsoever. Their panicked voices came through an open emergency channel, trapped beneath collapsed debris, with Drazul forces advancing steadily closer to their position. Every tactical instinct I understood at the time suggested the humans should abandon that position, prioritize the larger defense of the station over two individual lives caught in an increasingly dangerous crossfire. That is what my own species would have done, reluctantly perhaps, but decisively, choosing the greater good over individual risk. Daniel Cole did not hesitate. He redirected immediately, moving directly toward the collapsed section despite the increased danger, calling for Grace Miller to follow, while Olivia Hart and the remaining team members shifted formation to cover the exposed position. It should have been reckless. It should have created exactly the kind of opening the Drazul forces needed to finally break through. Instead, I watched something remarkable unfold. Even as Daniel Cole and Grace Miller worked to free the trapped workers, the rest of the team adjusted their defense with such fluid precision that the Drazul advance stalled completely, unable to capitalize on what should have been an obvious vulnerability. It was as though the humans had trained not just to fight, but to protect, without ever losing tactical control, treating the value of two civilian lives as equal in importance to the entire mission itself. They freed both workers within minutes, and fell back toward a more secure position, the Drazul boarding party, still unable to advance a single meter further than where they had started hours earlier. I do not know exactly when Vorak Thane realized he was facing something far beyond his expectations, but I imagine it was somewhere during those long, fruitless hours of failed advancement, watching a handful of defenders hold an entire boarding force at bay, while somehow still finding room to save two lives that offered no strategic value whatsoever. By the time reinforcement signals finally reached nearby Allied forces and additional support arrived, the Drazul commander made the decision to withdraw entirely, recognizing that continued engagement would only cost him more than the station itself was worth. His ships retreated back into the darkness from which they had come, leaving Meridian Reach bruised but intact, and leaving me with an understanding of humanity that no archive or report could ever have taught me. I found Daniel Cole afterward, sitting quietly near the damaged docking bay, his expression tired but calm, as though the events of the past several hours had cost him something he would not easily speak about. "Why did you risk everything for two people who could not affect the outcome?" I asked him. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Because the outcome was never just about winning," he said. "If we start deciding whose life matters and whose doesn't, we've already lost something more important than the fight itself." I did not have a response to that. I am not certain I have one still. That single answer, more than anything else I witnessed that day, reshaped how I understood the phrase Special Forces. It was not merely a description of exceptional combat capability, though that capability was undeniable. It was a description of something deeper, a willingness to hold both fierce strength and genuine compassion within the same breath, refusing to let one diminish the other, even in the middle of overwhelming danger. The galaxy, I realized, had not yet begun to understand what it was dealing with. I was only beginning to understand it myself. Word of what happened at Meridian Reach spread faster than I expected, though not in the way I imagined it would. There were no dramatic announcements, no formal declarations celebrating human capability. Instead, the story moved quietly through diplomatic channels, passed between officers and council members in careful, measured conversations, the kind of information that changes behavior long before it changes official policy. I remained on Meridian Reach for several more months following the attack, and during that time, I watched something shift in how other species interacted with the small human presence stationed there. Visiting delegations that once treated the humans with polite indifference now watched them with careful, evaluating eyes. Security protocols involving joint operations began quietly changing, giving human units greater autonomy and trust during dangerous situations, an adjustment that would have seemed unthinkable only months earlier. Sorrel Dane called me into her office one afternoon, holding a datapad filled with updated council briefings. "You were right," she admitted, something I had never heard her say so directly before. "We underestimated them completely." I asked her what specifically had changed her mind, since she had dismissed my early concerns as exaggerated. She turned the datapad toward me, showing a report from a completely different sector, far from Meridian Reach, describing an encounter between a small human escort unit and a hostile raiding force that had been terrorizing merchant convoys along a neglected trade route for years. The raiders had operated freely for so long that most nearby systems simply avoided the route entirely, considering the loss acceptable rather than risk direct confrontation. The human escort unit had not avoided confrontation. According to the report, they had tracked the raiders to their hidden base, coordinated with local systems to cut off their escape routes, and ended the threat entirely within a single coordinated operation, all while ensuring the safe passage of every merchant vessel under their protection. The report noted, almost as an afterthought, that the human unit involved was smaller in number than the force they had defeated. "This is happening more often," Sorrel Dane said, "not because humans are seeking conflict, because other species are finally requesting their help, trusting them with problems nobody else could solve." I found this development both reassuring and unsettling in equal measure. Reassuring, because it confirmed what I had come to believe about human character, the genuine desire to protect rather than dominate. Unsettling, because it revealed just how quickly humanity's reputation was spreading across a galaxy that had barely known they existed only a few years earlier. I later learned of another incident, one that solidified this reputation far beyond diplomatic circles. A regional commander from a rival power, confident in his own forces and dismissive of humanity's growing reputation, made the mistake of testing that reputation directly. His name was recorded simply as Commander Zeth Orlan, leader of a smaller expansionist faction, operating near contested border territories, not far from where the Drazul had once retreated. Commander Orlan believed the stories about human special forces were exaggerated propaganda, spread deliberately to discourage rivals from testing human-held territories. He organized a calculated strike against a lightly defended human outpost, confident that overwhelming numbers alone would guarantee an easy victory, regardless of who defended it. He was mistaken in ways that ended his campaign entirely within a single engagement. I read the official report from that encounter much later, once it had been declassified for wider diplomatic review. It described, in careful and measured language, how a small defending force anticipated the attack well before it arrived, using the terrain and their own limited resources with such overwhelming efficiency that Orlan's forces suffered complete strategic failure without ever gaining meaningful ground. The report noted that despite total tactical victory, the defending human forces extended medical assistance to surviving enemy combatants once the engagement ended, an act that stunned surviving officers from Orlan's own command structure. I mentioned this story to Olivia Hart during one of our final conversations before my assignment on Meridian Reach came to an end. "Doesn't it feel strange?" I asked her, "treating enemies with such care immediately after defeating them so thoroughly?" She considered the question seriously before answering, the way she always did when a question actually mattered to her. "Winning was never supposed to make us cruel," she said. "If it does, then maybe we didn't really win anything worth having." I thought about that answer for a long time afterward. It seemed to capture something essential about what made humanity's growing reputation so different from anything else I had studied. Other powerful factions across the galaxy inspired fear through dominance, through the clear threat of overwhelming force used without restraint. Humanity, through its special forces and the values they carried into every engagement, inspired something more complicated: respect mixed with caution, trust mixed with quiet unease, a recognition that here was a power capable of tremendous strength, yet choosing, consistently and deliberately, to temper that strength with genuine principle. By the time my assignment on Meridian Reach concluded, I had been asked to compile a comprehensive report for the Ithran Accord's broader diplomatic council, summarizing everything I had witnessed and learned about humanity's military capability and character. I spent many long nights preparing that report, trying to find language precise enough to convey what words alone struggled to capture. I ended the report the same way I had ended my very first observation months earlier, though this time with far greater understanding behind the words. "The galaxy has learned to fear humanity's warriors," I wrote, "but fear alone does not fully explain what we have witnessed. We have learned that these warriors fight not from a desire for conquest, but from an unwavering commitment to protect those who cannot protect themselves, extending that same commitment even toward those who stood against them. If this is what humanity calls special forces, then perhaps the trembling felt across the galaxy is not merely fear of their strength, but the humbling recognition of a strength most of us have never learned to carry so carefully." I did not know, when I submitted that report, how deeply it would shape my own future within the diplomatic corps, nor how it would lead me back to Meridian Reach one final time, for reasons far more personal than any assignment could have prepared me for. 2 years passed before I returned to Meridian Reach, though the station I found upon arrival looked remarkably different from the one I remembered. The damage from the Drazul attack had long since been repaired, but something deeper had changed as well, something in the way the station operated, the way different species moved through its corridors with a confidence that had not existed before. I had been reassigned as a permanent liaison between the Ithran Accord and human command structures, a role that would have seemed impossible to imagine during my earliest days as a nervous young observer. The Council had come to recognize, slowly and cautiously, that understanding humanity required more than distant reports and cautious diplomacy. It required people willing to stand beside them, to learn firsthand what made their warriors so different from anything the galaxy had encountered before. Daniel Cole greeted me at the docking bay when I arrived, though he looked different as well. Older somehow despite the relatively short time that had passed, carrying the quiet weight of experiences I could only imagine. Olivia Hart stood beside him, along with several new faces I did not immediately recognize, younger soldiers who had clearly been trained under Cole's guidance in the years since I had last walked these corridors. "You look like you've seen more of the galaxy since we last spoke," Cole said, offering a small, genuine smile. "I have seen a great deal," I admitted, though I am not certain any of it prepared me as thoroughly as my time here once did. He laughed quietly at that, a sound I remembered fondly from quieter moments between the dangerous ones. "Nothing really prepares you completely," he said. "You just learn to keep moving forward anyway." Over the following weeks, I settled back into station life, though my role had changed considerably. Where I had once simply observed from a careful distance, I now worked directly alongside human command structures, helping coordinate joint operations between the Ithran Accord and human forces stationed throughout the region. I attended briefings I once would have found impossible to access, listened to strategic discussions that revealed just how thoughtfully humans approached even the smallest details of protecting the systems under their care. I came to understand something during those weeks that my earlier reports had only begun to touch upon. Humanity's reputation as fearsome warriors was only half the story the galaxy needed to understand. The other half, quieter but equally important, was humanity's unwavering dedication to genuine partnership, treating allied species not as lesser participants requiring protection, but as true equals, deserving mutual respect and shared responsibility. I witnessed this most clearly during a joint training exercise between human forces and a young Ithran defense unit, the first of its kind attempted since the Diplomatic Council had begun exploring deeper military cooperation. I watched Nathan Price patiently teach defensive tactics to nervous young Ithran recruits, adjusting his usual sharp, economical instructions into something gentler, more encouraging, recognizing that our species approached conflict from a fundamentally different emotional foundation than his own. "You did well today," he told a young recruit named Leora Sen, after a particularly difficult training scenario, one she had clearly struggled through with visible frustration. "I made several mistakes," she replied, embarrassment evident in her voice. "Everyone does at first," he said. "Mistakes here mean you won't make them later, when it actually matters. That's the whole point." I watched her expression shift from embarrassment to quiet determination, and I recognized something familiar in that moment, the same steady confidence I had first witnessed years earlier during the cargo bay rescue, that changed how I understood humanity entirely. It was spreading now, not through conquest or dominance, but through patient teaching, through genuine partnership extended to species willing to learn. Grace Miller once told me something during those weeks that stayed with me long afterward, a simple observation delivered during a quiet evening in the station's common hall. "We're not trying to make the galaxy afraid of us," she said. "We're trying to make it safer for everyone in it. If people happen to feel safer having us around, that's a good thing. If our enemies feel afraid because of what that safety cost them to challenge, that's just an honest consequence, not the actual goal." I thought back to my earliest report, the one where I had described the galaxy trembling before humanity's warriors, and I realized my understanding then had been incomplete, shaped by fear and uncertainty rather than genuine comprehension. The galaxy did tremble, that much remained true. But the trembling I witnessed now, standing among humans who had become genuine colleagues and something close to friends, felt different from simple fear. It felt like the trembling of an old, cautious galaxy, slowly recognizing that true strength and genuine compassion could exist together within the same warriors, without one ever needing to diminish the other. Vorak Thane, the Drazul commander who had once retreated from Meridian Reach in defeat, reportedly issued a formal statement to his own command structure years later, one that eventually found its way into wider diplomatic circles. I read it during my final weeks compiling research for what would become my most comprehensive report yet, and I have never forgotten the honesty contained within his words. "We came expecting an easy conquest," he had written. "We left having learned an uncomfortable truth. Their strength was never really the danger. Their unwillingness to abandon what they chose to protect, that was the true danger. And it is a danger far harder to overcome than simple military force alone." I ended my final report to the Ithran Accord with different words than I had used before, words shaped by years of genuine understanding, rather than distant observation. The galaxy first learned to fear what it called special forces, believing the name referred simply to elite warriors capable of tremendous strength. What the galaxy has since learned, slowly and through genuine partnership, is that the name reflects something far deeper than combat capability alone. It reflects an unwavering commitment to protect, to include, and to extend genuine strength toward building something better, rather than simply toward tearing something down. If the galaxy still trembles at the mention of human warriors, let it be understood clearly that this trembling now carries as much respect and gratitude within it as it once carried simple fear, and that transformation, more than any single victory in battle, remains the truest measure of who these warriors have always been. I remained stationed alongside human forces for many years following that report, watching countless new recruits arrive, train, and grow into warriors carrying forward the same values I had first witnessed in a quiet cargo bay rescue that changed everything I believed about strength and conflict. I watched species across the galaxy slowly shift from cautious fear toward genuine partnership, learning, as I once had, that humanity's warriors carried far more within them than the galaxy had ever expected. I still think, often, about that very first night, standing frozen in an observation dome, watching 5 calm humans walk directly toward danger, without hesitation. I understand now what I could not understand then. The galaxy did not tremble simply because humans were dangerous. The galaxy trembled because humans proved, again and again, across countless quiet corridors and desperate confrontations, that they would rather risk everything protecting what mattered than ever consider walking away from it. That, more than any weapon or tactic or overwhelming show of force, remains the truest reason the galaxy still remembers their name.